And now we should talk about global Sumud Flotilla, something that the whole world has been following too, alongside ongoing genocide. Yasemin Acar will be speaking about this.
Dear jury, dear guests and organizers, my name is Yasemin Acar, steering committee member and organizer of the global Sumud Flotilla as well as the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. I speak to you as an organizer, a witness, and a human rights activist. I have sailed with unarmed vessels carrying food, medicine, and human witnesses to Gaza. The challenge siege that has existed since 2007 and was further intensified during the ongoing genocide. We act because the world's institutions, laws, and governments have failed to protect Palestinian lives, and because silence is complicity. Today, I will speak in 3 registers about the realities on the ground and at sea, the violations of international law, and the responsibilities we all share to resist injustice and demand accountability. First, the factual frame. For 18 years, Gaza has endured a brutal, illegal, and inhumane siege. The blockade violates international law, including general international law, international humanitarian law, and human rights law. It restricts everything: airspace, waters, borders, movement of people, and the flow of essential goods. Every aspect of life, daily life, has been controlled by the occupying power, even determining the number of calories allowed per person. A bureaucratic calculation that reduced human beings to statistics. After the genocide began, the siege became a siege upon a siege, a system of deliberate deprivation designed to punish, weaken, and control the Palestinian population. Families remain trapped without sufficient food, medicine, fuel, or water. Hospitals operate without electricity and supplies. Children are malnourished, weakened, and dying. This is not suffering. It is a systematic assault on life itself by the infliction of life conditions calculated to bring about the physical destruction of a whole people. The endurance of this colonial system has never been the work of one state alone. It has been sustained by a network of international actors whose complicity extends from the conference room to the factory floor. Through arms transfers that supply machinery of war, diplomatic cover that shields impunity, and economic partnerships that convert devastation into profit. The siege, thus, becomes not only a policy, but a structure of governance, weaponizing the very conditions of existence. Food, medicine, fuel, and water are transformed into tools of violence, distributed or withheld to discipline an entire population into submission. Generations have been born under blockade, their lives defined by scarcity and surveillance. Malnutrition, illness, and psychological trauma are not collateral outcomes, but the predictable consequences of a system built to degrade, dehumanize, and exhaust. International support, political, economic, and military, has woven this oppression into fabric of global order, while corporations extract profit from its maintenance. In this sense, the siege is not an aberration of international politics, but one of its most revealing expressions, a regime of control sustained by those who claim to defend human rights, yet continually enable their destruction. The so-called US-backed aid was part of the very same system. Aid distribution centers became death traps. Dozens of starving people were murdered in cold blood at these sites. This was not humanitarian failure or bureaucratic mismanagement. It was deliberate violence embedded in policy, a calculated cruelty that uses promise of survival as bait. Such acts reveal the nature of the system itself, not one of control alone, but of annihilation. When food becomes a weapon and relief a means of extermination, the intent is no longer merely to crush, but to erase. The siege, and its so-called aid apparatus function together as instruments of genocide, mechanisms through which life is reduced to something that can be granted or withdrawn at will. International law and global institutions have repeatedly failed Gaza. Investigations were delayed or buried. Enforcement mechanisms ignored. The media manufactured consent, portraying Gaza as a security threat rather than a besieged and starved people. It must be said clearly, the use of starvation as a weapon of war and the imposition of collective punishment are illegal. These crimes leave enduring scars, especially on children whose bodies and minds have been permanently damaged by deprivation. Nowhere is this more visible than in Gaza, where nearly half of the population are children. They are growing up amidst deprivation so severe that it stunts their physical development and fractures their sense of safety and possibility. For these children, hunger is not an episode, but a condition of life. Malnutrition, trauma, and loss have become the fabric of their childhoods. An entire generation has been marked by violence that seeks not only to destroy the present, but to extinguish the future of Gaza itself. Second, the criminalization of aid and the work of the global Sumud Flotilla. The missions of the global Sumud Flotilla and the Freedom Flotilla Coalition have always been humanitarian. Our vessels carry food, medicine, and human witnesses. Under international law, humanitarian aid and civilian vessels are protected. Yet, the flotilla missions have been criminalized over and over again. After the Conscience was bombed in Malta in May, we sailed with a small vessel called the Madeleine, carrying just 12 people. We carried only 8. Yet, we were attacked with chemical agents, intercepted in international waters, kidnapped and imprisoned. Despite these challenges, we returned, as promised, with 42 vessels and 462 people from across the globe. Organizing such a mission in only 2 months is a testament to the power of collective action. What was first a single boat mobilized the world. Doctors, engineers, human rights defenders, students, lawyers, and journalists united under the banner of global solidarity and resistance. The global Sumud Flotilla was again attacked at sea. Drone strikes targeted dozens of boats, first in Tunisian waters, then in international waters near Greece. This was not only a breach of the law of the sea, but a demonstration of impunity. The occupying power pursued a civilian humanitarian initiative across borders, attacking in national and international waters without restraint. Many of us were taken to Kitziot in the Negev desert, a prison notorious for torture and inhumane treatment. We endured conditions designed to break human dignity: beatings, sleep deprivation, psychological violence, sexual assault, dogs in the corridors and cells, tight handcuffs, blindfolds, and snipers' lasers fixed on our foreheads. Blatant violations of international human rights law. The walls bore blood, bullet holes, and the names of Palestinian hostages, especially from Gaza, who had possibly endured months, years, decades of imprisonment and torture. What we lived for a week was just a fraction of what Palestinian hostages endure for years. It must be clear, the attacks and interception did not stop us. It only strengthened our resolve. the global Sumud Flotilla mobilized millions worldwide through demonstrations, student occupations, dock workers' strikes, and global pressure. Military vessels from Italy, Spain, and Turkey were mobilized. To say, not out of goodwill, but because states feared the anger of their citizens. This was the work of the people, not of governments that remain complicit by maintaining ties to the Zionist entity. Our actions may have accelerated ceasefire negotiations, but our missions are not over. The siege continues, the genocide continues, aid remains criminalized. Third, law, colonialism, and the duty of conscience. International humanitarian law, the Fourth Geneva Convention, the Rome Statute, and customary law exist to protect human life. Collective punishment, deliberate deprivation of essentials, and attacks on humanitarian actors are explicitly prohibited. Yet these laws are ignored when political and economic interests outweigh human life. This failure is not accidental. It is deeply rooted in colonialism, apartheid, and global capitalism. The Zionist entity's siege, illegal blockade, and attacks are not isolated acts. They are part of a broader settler colonial project of dispossession and domination, serving to maintain Western and white supremacy in the Middle East. These crimes are enforced and enabled by the United States, which provides military, political, and economic support. But the United States is not alone. European states, particularly Germany, where I'm from, bear a profound historical and moral responsibility. Germany, invoking its own past crimes, has chosen not to prevent genocide, but to justify and materially and morally support another. Through arms sales, diplomatic protection, and the repression of solidarity movements, Germany has become a central pillar sustaining Israeli apartheid and genocide. Its historical guilt has been weaponized to shield a colonial regime and silence those who stand with the oppressed. This is not a conflict between equals. It is imperial domination rooted in colonial logic and white supremacy. And all of this is sustained by Western powers that continue to view Palestinians, Muslims, and Arab life as expandable. Sailing vessels unarmed into international waters under siege is dangerous, but we are aware of the risks our missions hold, and we continue because our lives are not more valuable than the lives of Palestinians. Sumud, steadfastness, is our guiding principle. The refusal to normalize injustice, starvation, and genocide. We ask this jury to recognize in legal and moral terms what has occurred and what persists, that the deliberate use of starvation, the blockade, the criminalization of aid, and systemic attacks on civilians constitutes crimes under international law, that those who enable or conceal these crimes, including the occupying power and its imperial backers, must be held accountable, and that inaction is complicity. This is not merely a legal argument. Laws exist to protect life, not to shield impunity. The people of Palestine are not statistics. They are human beings whose protection is our collective responsibility. And this is why tribunals like this one matter. When governments fail, when international courts remain silent, it is civil society, survivors, witnesses, and people of conscience who must act. Tribunals or flotillas are not symbolic. They are an assertion of people's justice, of the right and duty to document, to speak, and to resist. They are the living expression of global solidarity against colonial violence. And finally, we stand with the Palestinian people. We stand against colonialism, apartheid, and imperial domination. We stand for global solidarity and for humanitarian principles that cannot be negotiated or compromised. And we will continue to resist. Thank you.